been a little bit over a week. Hope you guys are doing good. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to our space for learning and growing all things mental health. How are you guys? I hope you guys are doing well. At the time of recording, it's a national holiday in Jamaica. Hopefully, I'll also put this up the same day because I'm 1 week behind. I don't want to, fall off. But anyway, so let's just jump right into it, right? So for this video, I want to start a monthly series. So I want to do 4 videos per month, 1 per week for now. And one of those videos, I want it to be focused on the topic of suicide. I started this on my Instagram and on social media platforms, something called #Suicideconversations. And what I aim to do with that is to really contribute to breaking the stigma and the sense of taboo around the topic of suicide. I know that we tend to have conversations about suicide when it has happened, but there are no conversations, or there are not much conversations around, signs to look for, how to support someone who probably wants to, do that, how to support families who have experienced loss through suicide, and what can cause people to decide or want to take that avenue, different conversations around this killer. I mean, from my perspective, from my point of view, I see that suicide is a silent killer in our society, not just Jamaica, but around the world. But it's not something that's talked about, and it's like people are afraid to talk about suicide, I guess, for fear of driving people to it, or for fear of encouraging it, or normalizing the act. But for me, #Suicideconversations is really just another way or another thing to be more educated and informed about. So that's what it is. So 1 video per month, I'm committing to it, and I'm saying this publicly because I want you guys to hold me accountable. 1 video per month for as long as I can, as long as I have the information and eventually can have the people to come on and share. I want to talk about suicide because I want us to get to a point where we're not afraid of it, because I feel like there's a lot of fear surrounding suicide, but we're not afraid of it. And the more informed we are, the more we will be able to help people to navigate away from the desire of suicide, or even help to support persons who have experienced the loss, like I mentioned before, and even our response to suicide, or to attempts, or the ideation of, less mocking and less harsh criticism, and more empathy, understanding, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a very long introduction, but I wanted to just talk about, so this is our first #Suicide conversation. And like I said, it's a conversation, so definitely jump into the comments and let's just chit chat about this thing. All right, so I wanted to touch briefly on Jamaica's response to suicide. And this is essentially my own observations, my just be a part of this culture all my life, and having seen the responses, having had the response myself before I was properly informed and aware, and just how suicide is portrayed in our society. In the last couple of years, especially following the, big thing since 2020 coming up, there have been like an increasing number of cases of suicide, whether it is that the act has been actually committed, or more young people are calling into different hotlines stating that, yes, this is what I want to do. I want to end my life. So, I mean, we can't not talk about it, especially in our country, right? So what is suicide really? Let's start there. What exactly is suicide? And suicide is essentially death by one's own deliberate action. So you, as the person, you are doing things. You've made a decision to end your life, and you are now going to do what it is that you're gonna do to end your life. And that's what suicide really is. And approximately 800,000 people die from suicide yearly around the world. It's the second cause of death in 15 to 24-year-olds, and we see attempts or the acts being committed 4 times higher in men, whereas it's 3 times higher. The attempt of the act is 3 times higher in women. So what can cause people to want to end their lives? There are a number of reasons, but a few of those reasons are, of course, mental illnesses. Some people go through some deep, dark, dreary periods of depression, and they're unable to come out of it. And the best way out they see is by ending their life. For others, it may be a financial issue. You may have persons who are in serious debt or bankruptcy, and they are so overwhelmed and frustrated by it that the only way they can see themselves out of the situation is by ending their lives. There may be persons who are experiencing abuse and bullying, and I mean, we see, especially again in Jamaica where I'm living, a lot of young people, a lot of like students are coming up in the news as being bullies or being bullied by their peers. And it's not no little fenke bullying, it's some serious aggressive acts of bullying, and that can really drive somebody to want to end their life. Like, typically, like, from my point of view, again, when most times when persons get to that point, it's that they cannot see another way out of what they are experiencing. Another potential cause is having a really chronic physical illness, cancer, an autoimmune disease, some failing organ in the body, and having to experience the pain that comes along with that. Persons may observe their family members being financially ruined because of their illness, and they feel overwhelming senses of guilt, and so they think that me leaving or me exiting this plane is the best way forward for my family and for me. So there are there are other reasons why persons would want to end their own lives. And if you know of any, you can just drop them in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Let's get that conversation going. In Jamaica, the last statistics I looked at was for 2019, and the number of people who die by suicide per year, as of the 2019 stats, is 2.4 per every 100K. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but a life is a life, and 2.4, call it 3 people, that's a lot. And when you look at the demographic of the persons who are dying by suicide, you have a lot of teenagers, a lot of young people, especially again in the news, a lot of young people. I think the last thing I saw, the other day was a 12-year-old boy. A 12-year-old boy was found, and I mean, you can only imagine what could possibly be happening in that child's life to cause him to decide that this is the only way out, this is the only way I can get some kind of relief or whatever. So it's a very difficult situation, dealing with suicide. So in our culture, again, the Jamaican culture, that's our focus for today. But in the Jamaican culture, what is the response like? As I mentioned before, or did I? I don't remember. But it's not something that's talked about as freely and as openly as I would like to do here on this space. If something comes up in the news, or if probably like a family member or somebody who has attempted or was actually successful, it may be talked about, but it is not broadcasted, right? And I guess one can argue that there's no need to broadcast it, because what's the point? You don't want to put those things out there, and it's not. And then of course our culture, our people tend to be very tough externally, tend to portray like a kind of aggression and toughness, and so talking about them things is just like not really about that. But the fact of the matter is, it still happens, and conversations like this need to be had. So it's not talked about often. When it is talked about, it's because incidents have happened and there's a reaction to it. Persons come out on social media probably talking about, check up on your strong friends, check up on the ones that are always smiling, check upon the people who are successful. You don't know what's happening, or persons may come out and probably share a bit of what they have experienced, like, at one point in my life I felt this particular way. And that there's a buzz around the immediate occurrence of an incident, and then it dies down. And what I've realized is, the more frequently it happens, like, say for instance, like there are 3 instances that come out in the news, the reaction or the responses become less and less, because people are just like, okay. And sometimes sometimes too, it can be a case where the fact is just so overwhelming, and it's a lot to digest, that persons kind of just think, okay, I have to just keep it moving, I can't really process that right now, that kind of thing. Which I understand. I do understand, because again, news and media can be very overwhelming, especially when the media or the news topics are a little bit dreary. But yeah. And then, so there's the one on one side, there is the not very proactive in the response, or reaction to an incident, and then the die down after a couple of days. But then on the other hand, there is the very harsh and very critical response. So at the time that I wrote down this script or these notes, something had happened in the news where this lady, and if you are Jamaican and if you recall this story, please comment below. But this lady drove off a bridge, this famous bridge in Jamaica. It's called the Flat Bridge. Very dangerous place to drive, notorious for people running off the road and drowning. And this lady was seen driving back and forth on the bridge for a while, and then she just drove over. There were attempts to rescue her, but so I was sitting in a bus traveling home, and I was hearing persons, talking about the story, and they were expressing their opinions. And the opinions were so harsh. Like they were making assumptions as to why she would have done that. You know, persons were just like, is a man, she make her stress her out, and before she go find one next man and go settle down and blah blah, she go kill off herself, and you know the man gonna live in life and she dead, and da, 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 da. And they were calling her stupid and all these different things. And it kind of it felt hurtful to me, because I'm just like, even if it was a case where there was some relational issues, and I think it came out in the news that there was, you don't know, you don't know how people, you don't know the gravity of the situation. And one thing with mental health is persons' responses are on a spectrum. What you could have possibly worked through and fight through and overcome and move on with, for somebody else it could be the final straw. It could be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and that will be the one thing that pushed them over the edge. So people's responses to these things are different, and so you can't, or you shouldn't, I'm not gonna say you can't, because you definitely can, but I mean, it would be nice, it would be good for us to be more mindful of the fact that people are different, including how they respond to stress and trauma and things that affect their mental health. So, you know, that overly, that very harsh criticism that comes with persons who have either died by suicide or even are attempting suicide. I mean, how many videos have circulated in this country about persons who are probably on some building attempting to jump off or threatening to kill themselves, and you hear persons like, go and go do it then, you know, da 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 da. It's just a lot. I don't know if me mentioning that is going to cause YouTube to flag me, but we're gonna figure it out. But yes, so those are the typical responses in our culture: silence, a quick reaction, then silence, harsh criticism, that kind of thing. Now, based on our reactions and responses and how, as a culture, we look at the phenomenon that is suicide, what are the effects? You know, what are the effects on persons who are struggling based on our own responses? So what you find is there are a lot more persons, there are persons struggling in silence and isolation. You're in a space where persons who want to end their lives are criticized harshly, are met with rude remarks and, you know, just dismissive or dismissal. Yeah. So you're met with that kind of response, and it's not encouraging. It doesn't make you, or it may not necessarily make people who are struggling want to talk out about anything, because hey, if I talk about this, I'm going to be mocked, I'm going to be criticized, people are going to actively encourage me to go do it. You know, some people may be joking, some people may be serious, and I'm finding that there are a lot more people who are seriously encouraging people to go. And right, so more people struggle in silence and isolation. There's also the fear of judgment as opposed to the desire to get help. So nobody is going to, or you find that persons are less likely to talk about these issues because they don't want to be judged. You know, you observe the responses that are meted out to persons in society who either express the desire to end their lives or who have ended their lives, and you're thinking, wow, if I should come out with this struggle, come out and say I'm struggling with these thoughts and this desire, then this is what I'm going to get. And it's especially more painful when you see the responses among your own family members and friends. When you have friends or family who are very critical or criticize people who come out publicly like that, and you look on and you think, wow, if it was me, that's probably what I would get to. Very hard, very challenging to really get into. This video is very long. And then, of course, the lack of education may prevent people from helping loved ones in the way that they need. So not knowing how to talk to somebody who has that desire, not knowing how to connect with somebody who has that desire, not knowing how to help somebody to come out of that mindset. And then Jamaican people, Jamaican parents and stuff, they're so harsh sometimes, to be honest. Your child may probably come to you and say, "Mommy, Daddy, I feel this way." And the response is, "You go sit down, a foolishness that you're talking about. Go take up a book, whatever." Not having that kind of compassion and empathy to help a person, even if you don't know how to, if it's even to say, let me, or I hear you, and even if I can't help you, let me try and get somebody to talk to you, to help you through what you're going through. So, and then of course the ultimate effect is more tragic deaths. So you have persons in isolation, persons who are afraid to talk out because they don't want to be judged, and then family members who may not know how to help their family. All of that boils down to more deaths by suicide. So in Jamaica, what is being done so far? There is an organization called Choose Life International, and their work is centered around helping youth who have suicidal ideation or attempts of same. And I think they do like counseling and stuff. So you have organizations like Choose Life that does counseling with youth. You have the mental wellness hotline. I think in an earlier video I spoke about the number of young people that they spoke to. I don't know if I mentioned how many of them were dealing with issues of suicide, but if I did, yeah, that space has been created to help young people get the kind of support that they need. And then in a 2020 article from the Ministry of Health, it was said that healthcare workers were to start providing care and referrals for persons who needed that kind of support, support with dealing with suicidal ideation, and to also promote healthy lifestyle to reduce the risk of suicidality. Now, I don't know how much of that has been enacted, but it's something I'll definitely keep my eyes out for, or eyes open to, because it's something that's important. It's a part of mental wellness, the whole topic of suicide and dealing with suicide and helping persons to move away from the desire of suicide and step into a space where they see freedom and help in different ways outside of taking their own lives. So, there are organizations that are a handful of organizations that are working with young people. There are conversations being had in different spaces. And then, of course, there's a Ministry of Health. Gotta go fact check that one. But there is talks about equipping healthcare workers with information and resources to help people. So what more can we do? And what more will we do to really address the topic of suicide? Have more conversations. Have more suicide conversations. I believe, like I mentioned earlier, it's very important to have these kind of conversations, because the more educated I believe that you are, the more it can help to save a life. And education is not just knowing information, it's knowing what to do with the information. So I'm talking about practical things, like knowing the kind of questions to ask somebody who you think may be suicidal or have suicidal ideations, knowing how to support somebody struggling with suicidal ideation, and how to help them, step away from that mindset. Supporting families and friends who may have had a loss, supporting them in their grief. Compassion, some people need to actually learn compassion, and empathy, and how to really talk to people who are actively suicidal, or who are just having passive thoughts of suicide. So yeah, have more conversations, be more educated, learn early intervention strategies, be supportive of families and loved ones, practice empathy, and support families of at-risk individuals, and also give support to those. That's what I just said. Support families of at-risk individuals, and teach families how to support these individuals. So yeah, it's a tragedy that affects us on all levels. That's suicide. And the effect is great. Loss of life, of course, guilt and shame for persons who are left behind. People thinking, if I had only known, if I had probably talked to them nicer, or was more open or understanding. There are lots of questions that are often asked. Why would they do this? What went wrong? What could I have done? And of course, there's like the deep pain in those that are left behind. So I really think that the topic of suicide should be less taboo. It is a high profile killer, and it's something that we need to be more equipped to tackle. There are many lives at risk, and so we need to take action to prevent it as much as possible. And yes, there will be persons who will slip through the cracks, but if we can create different spaces that will allow persons to, because oftentimes, like, suicidal ideation comes from a deep place of like needing help. Like, it's like a deep cry for help in some cases. And just being able to offer the kind of support, the kind of healing support that people need, can do so much. You can literally save a life. So here's to more suicide conversations. We'll be having a lot more of those conversations. But tell me in the comments below, like, what are your thoughts on the topic of suicide? Are you afraid of talking about it? Do you know anybody who has probably struggled with the thoughts? Have you struggled with the thoughts? And how have you dealt with it, or how did they deal with it? Let's start having this conversation and making it a norm, so that persons who are genuinely in need of the help and support, they can get it. If it's even just a listening ear, right? So guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, this is a very long video, but I hope that it was beneficial. I hope that it was informative. I can probably drop some music in the background for make it not feel so boring. But yeah, don't forget to like, comment, share, and of course subscribe if you haven't already joined our little community. We're building a great community over here. We're all about mental wellness and mental health support, so you really want to get in on that. I'll see you in the next video, and until next time, take care.